Yes, please. Thank you. Yeah, right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this special council meeting of the 24th of March. Before we start, may I remind all members who are wishing to speak to make sure your microphones are switched on, as this is being webcast. Thank you. Do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from councillors Ian Morin, Steve Ardell-Walter, James Cole, Roger Croft, Alan Macro, Keith Tropping, Jeff Beck, Mike Johnston, Gordon Lundy, Nick Gooders, Carol Jackson-Durger, Graham Pask and Dennis Bennyworth, and from Honorary Aldermen Joe Mooney, Royce Longton and Alan Thorpe.
Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chairman. In respect of item 3, the budget phase 2 consultation and the transitional grant, Councillor Lynn Doherty has been granted a dispensation by the Governance and Ethics Committee to speak and vote on financial proposals pertaining to short breaks funding, should they arise during the discussion this evening. Councillors Marcus Franks and Lee Dillon have an interest in agenda item 3, the budget phase 2 consultation and transitional grant, by virtue of the fact that their employer, Sovereign Housing, receives funding from the council for its neighbourhood warden scheme. They both applied to the Governance and Ethics Committee for a dispensation to speak and vote on this item. The committee decided that a dispensation should be granted, but that the dispensation would permit Councillor Franks and Councillor Dillon to speak but not vote on this item. We have also received a number of personal interests declared in relation to item 3, and these are listed on the notices displayed on the door and also in the chamber. Details of those interests will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting.
Thank you. Right, members, item 3 on your agenda, the 2016-17 budget phase 2 consultation and the transitional grant. Could I ask Councillor Jones, please, to present this?
Thank you. Still getting to grips with the technology, Chairman. Thank you. Back in the beginning of the month, on the 1st of March, we passed what was probably one of the certainly the most difficult budget I've ever been involved in. I think anybody else in this chamber has ever had to put forward. We passed quite a number of measures that none of us wanted to do. The scale and the speed of the reductions we've had in government grant have been immense, and that has driven what has been a very fast debate and those very difficult decisions. What's been very good about that is the quality and the maturity of the debate, not just within this chamber, but also the debate that all of us have been having with our communities. There isn't a community across West Berkshire that isn't going to be significantly affected by the cuts that we've had to make. We do have to live within our means, both as a nation but also as a council, and that is the basis by which we set our budgets. We're going to have to recalibrate what West Berkshire Council can do. We've got a shrinking financial envelope, an envelope that has shrunk very significantly this year, but will again shrink over the coming years. And there are growing pressures, particularly in the care area. I think Councillor Law at the last meeting articulated very well the sorts of challenges we face with when the care budget has grown from about a third of the council's budget to half now. It's going to compress everything else that we do very significantly. And I think the prospect is we'll be looking in a few years' time at authority which can afford to carry on the care functions, carry on waste collection and carry on with the roads, but precious little else. All those other things are going to have to be facilitated, and that will require very significant leadership, not least from many of the 52 councillors in this room, but indeed probably also members of the audience. This debate has actually made us rethink what we do, but how we do it. What is important to our communities, and how does it get provided? That we're even having this debate tonight is actually, we do need to thank our MPs who've been lobbying extremely hard on behalf of West Berkshire. That we've now got some transition funding to put in place to at least so as we can transform services in a different way. In effect, they've bought us time to manage things better. We've gone through 2 phases of consultation, and that's informed our thinking for tonight's recommendations, which we put forward from the executive. In doing so, I think we've got to thank both council officers for their involvement, but also thank our communities and our parish and town councils for the very good debate we've been having with them, and particularly I know a number of members were at the district parish conference a couple of nights ago, where there is a very strong willingness on behalf of the parish councils to engage in what they can do and what matters to their communities. Back on the 1st of March, we allocated £400,000 of that transitional funding. Now we're in a position, having the consultation finished, to allocate a further £1 million. And members will see the proposals as set out in 2.2 of the agenda. And I know my colleagues will be speaking to those in due course. There are perhaps 2 items I would particularly like to draw attention to. But the very different ends of the spectrum of where we've allocated the money. We've allocated £475,000 to libraries. The library debate has been particularly difficult for myself. When I was leader of the authority, I presided over an expansion of the library service, a refurbishment of a number of libraries, including Thatcham, and a rebuilding of the library in Hungerford. They are very important community assets, and I think every member in this chamber fully understands that and values them equally. No library will be closed before a needs impact assessment. We want to work with our communities to save the others. We want to work with our communities, our parish councils and town councils to transform this particular service. But I know Councillor Cole will speak significantly more on this later. At the very other end of the spectrum of the finances is domestic violence, where we've allocated £25,000 to the domestic violence team. If we look at the public responses, we had 38 responses, far less than people who responded to the issue of the corn exchange or many others. But I think we in this chat, I think we recognise our responsibility in this area. This was not a cut we wanted to make, and it's probably a service which is invisible to many people, but it does exemplify the sort of work that a council like West Berkshire has to do. Much of it is invisible, but it is important that now we've got that opportunity, we need to take that. This proposals tonight are about transformation. They are not about ongoing running. We still need solutions, and we still need to be talking to all the different interest groups, and we've had some of that dialogue earlier this evening at the executive, but that has to go on, and we will be talking to people in much more detail. But there is an opportunity here. There is actually an opportunity for parish councils and town councils to take on services which are very relevant to their communities. Yes, it does present them challenges, but I think on behalf of all the other members in this chamber, we want to work with them to try and solve those problems and keep these very important services. So in closing, we have faced a very challenging few months, but I think as a community across West Berkshire and communities across West Berkshire, we are facing up to the challenges we have. We have got some extra time and we can put plans in place, but we want to work both across the chamber and with the communities to solve them for our long-term benefit. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Frederickson. Do you wish to speak now, or?
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to second and will reserve my right.
Thank you very much. Then could I ask Councillor Dillon, please, to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight is about allocating £1 million of transitional funding, but it's to mitigate the harm of the Conservative government ideological decisions to cut services and the impact that's having on our community. Now, we've been helped out in our decision making tonight by an impressive number of consultation responses, especially given the short timescales. And we should thank those that took the time to take part in local debate. And I especially would like to thank the cross-party and no party at all group, SOS, because they have organised demonstrations, they have held public meetings, and they have raised the level of debate within the community. So I'd like to thank them for their energy in engaging with the council and councillors. Now, those responses, Mr. Chairman, have put us in a better position as councillors to understand what matters most to our residents. And I've taken reading those responses that what matters most is protecting the vulnerable, keeping communities connected, and committing to younger years education. These are ideals that I am proud to say that we as Liberal Democrats and as residents ourselves fully support. It's only a shame that central government don't, otherwise we might not have to have this debate here at all. Now, Mr. Chairman, I would like to briefly examine some individual proposals, and we would like to forward some suggestions of better ways of money, so ways that we can impact on some of those taxes that haven't received time. We hope that is on board, and although there is criticism, there is also suggestions, and we think that both of those are right for an opposition to put forward. Calcott service point is going to go the same way as many access points have across the district. And with the council focusing on providing services online and through the telephone systems, we want to make sure that the small but committed number of residents that attend that service point have a chance to evolve with the changes. And so we would ask that while making all residents in the east aware of the closure, that we make a particular effort to signpost those residents that regularly use it so that they know that they can access services online. The success of the transitional funding being allocated to the children's centres will rely on finding suitable community access points. Now, there are some rural communities whose community facilities are already fully booked at peak times. And we are fearful that if we can't find those community access points, it will lead to an increase in rural isolation. So, Mr. Chairman, we would ask that where children's centres play such an important role in not only supporting younger children and their education, but also a support for mums and dads, that as soon as possible, we try to reverse the decision of going down to one hub for each area and expand back into rural hubs so that children's centres have a permanent base in our rural communities and are fully resourced. The council is asking parish councils and community groups to take more of an active part and take on more services. So where, regrettably, CCB won't have any transitional funding, we would encourage parish councils to work even closer with the CCB so that whilst there is still funding in place, they can be upskilled and CCP can help impart some of that knowledge, so they are more resilient to being able to deal with these changes. We are keen supporters of increasing the role that individual councillors can play in mitigating these cuts. At the last council meeting, we tabled an motion around councillors' allowances, and whilst that wasn't accepted, we are happy to be more involved in the trading standards, environmental health, licensing services and dealing with service complaints. However, we think that to be able to provide a comprehensive service to our residents, we need to make sure that members are fully trained in that, and we would ask that that would be compulsory training. With substance misuse services, we've seen a reduction in funding, and despite the allocation of transitional funding, this has the real ability to not only hurt the public purse overall, but also the users themselves. Without early access of hard-to-reach groups, we could see users fully disengaged from local services, and the consequences of that, without trying to scaremonger, Mr. Chairman, is increases in local crime levels. We want to see at the earliest possible opportunity the detail behind this proposal so that there is as much focus as possible on early intervention. One area that, despite the lack of details in our paperwork, I have been able to find the detailed costings behind, and I thank the officers for providing that, is on public transport. As I said earlier, we need our communities to be connected so they can access vital services from the CAB to local hospitals to leisure facilities. But the balance has not yet been struck in the detail of the proposals. There are increased services between Newbury and Thatcham from every half an hour to every 15 minutes, yet there are still communities like Beach Hill that won't have any connection to Newbury or Reading at all. We urge the council to use some of the £50,000 of contingency funding within that budget of 465,000 to keep the 154 service to Beach Hill to Reading going, so that people can get into Reading and then access other major transport routes. The cost of that service is less than £2,000, Mr. Chairman, and we think that we can reduce the contingency fund by £2,000, not put the council at risk, and yet keep a community connected. And we would urge members opposite to support that. We would also like the council to look again at how it's going to fund the purchase of the 3 minibuses. £150,000 of transitional funding is being earmarked to purchase those. And we feel there are different ways that you can fund that purchase through capitalising it that reduces the actual costs of having to use the money now, and you could divert most of that 150,000 back into protecting some of the frontline services. It could, for example, be spent on allowing the national concessionary travels tokens to be used on community transport schemes. As a council, we are asking communities to help, and when they do, we should be able to help them back. And I think using the transport scheme, we can do that. The wardens, Mr. Chairman, play a crucial role in making their communities safer and a more enjoyable place to live. And my close association with them at the Town Council is well known. I'm not inclined to comment any further on them, except to acknowledge the role they play. And I really hope that the town and parish councils can come up with a lasting solution for those. I know particularly in Thatcham, they are well supported. And I know members across the political divide in Thatcham are keen to see them kept as well. I have left libraries till last, Mr. Chairman, on purpose. I think I've demonstrated in my previous comments a real commitment to trying to provide some positive suggestions where possible and not playing political games. However, with libraries, we feel that the council must accept some level of blame for the way in which the consultation has been handled. It has engaged parish councils too late with too little information and put forward proposals that I think the majority of the community can see would be in breach of our statutory duty. That, Mr. Chairman, is not only irresponsible, but it is actions that could cost the council hundreds of thousands of pounds in legal costs, money that the transitional funding could be wiped away in an instant. The papers that are submitted still say that Wash Common and Field Library are going to shut. We've heard from the Deputy Leader in his opening remarks that no library will shut until a detailed needs assessment has been completed, and we welcome that. We would also ask that once that piece of work has been done, that we go back out and consult the communities on those decisions. This is a separate issue, I think, from the overall budget cuts, where DCMS have required us to do this assessment, and so we feel another stage of consultation is needed. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to express our group's views on a range of services. We want to see a vibrant community and a council that provides for its residents even in difficult times. We hope our suggestions will help towards that, and despite these cuts, and we worry about the long-term damage that they will do to our community and the overall cost to the public purse, we are willing to work together to find ways to reduce the impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Could I ask Councillor Cole, please?
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to quote the dictionary definition of transition, which is the process or a period of changing from one state or condition to another. And I think this should be borne strongly in mind by our communities. Things will not be the same. They have to change. And since the announcement of the Transition Grant funding, officers and I have been working to develop the proposals for both the library service and the Corn Exchange, which are before you this evening. I'd like to address first the proposal for Transition Grant funding of £475,000 for the library service. 2,751 separate responses on the consultation were received on the proposal to reduce the library service, and that demonstrates how much the people of West Berkshire love and value their libraries. I should also acknowledge the various petitions and other approaches made to the Council registering concern at the potential loss of so many libraries. We have taken note of all the responses and have acted accordingly. During the period of consultation, work was being done to seek advice from key agencies, including the DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and parish and town councils. We asked the DCMS for advice due to the vague nature of the statutory duty outlined in the Public Libraries and Museums Act 1964. They advised that a needs assessment would assist the Council in deciding the best means of developing the library service in the immediate future. The needs assessment will give guidance on how the Council complies with the Public Libraries and Museums Act and also with the Public Sector Equality Duty enshrined in the 2010 Equality Act. It will do this by examining the needs of the community and of various disadvantaged groups in terms of their library needs. Coming to the revised proposal for libraries, we're now recommending the retention of 7 static libraries and 1 mobile. Streamlining the mobile library routes onto a single vehicle is a sensible efficiency saving. And Chairman, I would remind members that the Public Libraries and Museums Act requires every library authority to provide a service that is efficient as well as comprehensive. Retaining a mobile service will ensure that the needs of those in our community who are unable to access a static library continue to be met. We've also listened to residents' concerns regarding accessing library and other council services in rural areas and have accordingly allocated funding to rural bus subsidies. And of course, Councillor Simpson will be speaking in more detail on this. And we will, of course, be continuing our at-home library service, which delivers books via volunteers to customers who are genuinely unable to get to another library. The 2 libraries proposed for closure, Thiel and Wash Common, are the 2 which cost the Council the most in relation to their footfall. Examples of changes to library services elsewhere in the country indicate that this limited reduction in the number of libraries will not prevent the Council from meeting its statutory responsibility for a comprehensive and efficient library service. However, I should say that this proposal does not necessarily mean the end of these 2 branch libraries. Before they actually close, our officers will meet with Thiel Parish and Newbury Town Councils to assess how they or any other community groups might be able to run a service and at what level of help West Berkshire Libraries can give in this transition to that service. And I must add that the school library at Field does not form part of this proposal. In the remaining branch libraries, we plan to install self-service and self-access technologies. The self-access system allows library customers to let themselves into a library at certain controlled times when no staff are present, and they can borrow and return books, read or study, and use the public computers. This technology will allow us to retain library access and reduce the level of staffing required. Although significant savings will be made from the library's staffing budget, we will, however, need contributions from communities to help bridge the gap between what can be saved by these service initiatives and the original savings target. I intend to hold further meetings with town and parish councils and community interest groups shortly to give more focus as to how the Transition Grant funding can be used to develop a model for effective partnerships. Turning to the proposal for Transition Grant funding of £56,000 for theatres, the consultation generated 3,224 responses, which demonstrates how important the cultural offering is to our residents. The Corn Exchange enjoys significant financial support from West Berkshire Council. Because of the challenging financial position we found ourselves in following the reduction of the revenue support grant, our proposal was to reduce the amount of the grant to the Corn Exchange. Following a meeting with the Corn Exchange, we're proposing transitional funding of £56,000, which will enable the Corn Exchange to find additional funding and review its strategy during this transition period. We're not proposing to alter the reduction in funding for the Watermill Theatre as a result of the consultation, as this will not impact the principal activity of the theatre. And finally, Chairman, I'd like to thank the officers who have worked with me to put forward these proposals. The timescales we've had to work to have been challenging, but once again, they've risen to the challenge and they are to be commended. And therefore, I would like Council to accept the proposals with regard to the transition funding for both the library service and the theatres. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Simpson, please.
Subsidised bus operations of a further 460k in the phase 2 consultation period, bringing the phase 1 and 2 cuts to 780k. In examining how to reduce the subsidies, priority has been to preserve the route network as much as possible by reducing peak services and lowering the frequency or the number of days as necessary. The priority routes have been Newbury to Thatcham, Newbury Town, Lambourne to Newbury, the Compton Hampstead Norris to Hermitage, Hungerford to Newbury, Basildon to Pangbourne and Reading, Lambourne to Newbury, a second morning peak, rural routes north and south of Thatcham, the 101 and 104, and Lambourne to Swindon, 90. Of necessity, some routes have had to be withdrawn since the subsidy cost has been huge, such as the 90 Lambourne to Hungerford. There were 398 phase 2 consultations with 327 comments, of which 370 were from individuals, 14 from groups and organisations, 14 from town and parish councils. Meetings have been held with parish councils to discuss their routes and their problems. Lambourne with 90, 80, 82 and 4, Basildon, Pangbourne and Purley, the 143, Upper Bucklebury, Thatcham and South and Crookham and Aldermaston, the 101 and 104. At this juncture, Pangbourne, Basildon, Aldermaston and Lambourne villages have made offers of financial contributions. The Council is grateful for these offers and their comments. It is attempted, where possible, to incorporate the improvements in routings and timings and frequencies within the limitations of costs. Greenham Common Trust and Newbury College have also been approached to discuss support. The Council has allocated 337k of transitional funding in 2016 and 17 to support subsidised buses. This has been split out as follows. 250k is on support for the proposed network after the phase 1 and 2 cuts. 75k for home to school transport for entitled pupils, home to school transport by Redibus for Castlegate school pupils of 12k. The 250k is necessary as current contracts are extant and they have to run. They expire during June through September 2016. The situation remains still a little work in progress as Transport Operations deals with adjacent LAs and the individual bus companies. The base assumption that we're working on is that the reduced network will be as stated in the information pack that you have tonight after the phase 1 and 2 proposals. However, as negotiations and discussions have progressed, it looks possible, and I stress possible, that we can make some improvements to a number of the routes. And there are several instances where we're still trying to achieve what we want. As of yesterday, the situation was Bus 2, Newbury to Greenman Common, we hoped some additional peak services. Bus 4, Newbury to Lambourne, an additional morning peak service from Great Shefford to Newbury will be added. Bus 8, Newbury to Greenham, we may have to lose a peak service running through to Pigeon Farm and part of the racecourse estate, but we're still working that problem. Bus 82, Great Shefford to Lambourne and Wattage, will be retained and funded locally by the parishes. Bus 90, Lambourne to Swindon, will continue the service with a reduced frequency, but importantly will provide a Monday to Friday service. Bus 101, Newbury to Thatcham, and the 104, the hourly service is still under review. Bus 101, the Calcott to Chapel Row and Thatcham, we're hoping for 1 to 3 journeys, Monday to Friday to Thatcham, and 1 journey Monday and Wednesday to Calcott, which is better than had been previously thought. Similarly, Bus 104, Calcott to Aldermaston, Brimpton and Thatcham, we hope to provide 2 journeys to Thatcham Monday to Friday. That's 2 journeys each day, I should explain. 1 journey on Monday and Wednesday to Calcott. The Bus 107, Newbury to Downlands, there is a possibility we'll be able to maintain peak services, not previously our base assumption. And we've been able to organise, we hope, a Monday to Saturday daytime service from the Bus 143 route from Basildon to Pangbourne, and importantly maintain its link to Reading rather than to Calcott, which again had been an earlier assumption. We're keen to provide a service to Beach Hill, and the Bus 75 is the Bus 154 is the preferred option, so we're working on that. In addition to these bus routes, there are 3 other cost reductions. The Redibus scheduled service, that's Reading to Thatcham to Newbury, will be withdrawn from March 27, as it loses support from both West Sparks and Reading. The council additions to the National Concessionary Travel Scheme, that's the supplementary additions over and above statutory minima, will be withdrawn from the 1st of May. And the development and maintenance of the bus's retail passenger information, West Sparks will be withdrawing its funding, and only the balance of where Reading has an interest will be maintained. On several of the above-mentioned routes that I've talked about, the council is considering buying from Capital 16-seater minibuses as substitutes for commercial buses that can be on offer. The plan is for the council to buy up to 3, Lambourne, Pansildon, Pangbourne, and the 10104 services out of Thatcham are candidate routes where we can deploy them. And of course, being lower cost and servicing thin routes, they're easier to, they will be less expensive. The council has commissioned a total transport study from Plymouth University, and this shows some options to consider and ways forward to make a better use of our community transport assets. A pilot operation is already underway with South Central Ambulance Services and the council's community transport minibuses. The aforementioned minibus routes that we propose, working in cooperation with parish councils, may also be regarded as pilots. Over the next year, Highways and Transport Operations will review the Council's options in this area and make proposals for working these assets harder. One thing that's been very apparent in this
Could you
period of
please sum up,
consultation-
Councillor Simpson, please?
Sorry?
Please sum up now,
Yeah,
please.
I am. One thing that has been very apparent during this period of consultation over the cuts, many of the bus routes are very poorly used, and that's why we've had to address them. Discussions with parish councils over demand revealed some embarrassing statistics, and I can quote a personal one. The one commuting passenger from Coldash, my ward, who goes down to Thatcham Station. There's a simple message I must give to us all. Patronise our buses. The council cannot continue to finance empty buses. It's up to the council, the town and parish councils and the volunteer community to be more creative and find alternative solutions. I commend the efforts of the transport operations team who've had to work under extreme pressure inside normal lead times, and I therefore recommend this budget whereby they have managed to reduce the bus subsidies by 53% but only reduce the passengers by 25%. Their work has been commendable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Law, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've got a few things I'd like to say, but I'd like to start with just adding to the table on page 13 in your papers. That table just reflects only the responses to the formal consultation. It does not, for example, incorporate petition responses. And I'm fully aware, personally, of having received a 500 plus signature to petitions on one bus route alone, the 143. So we often look at this table and compare which are the issues that most concern residents. And I think the number under public transport is rather understated, as there was lots of petitions. That's my first point. Second point is, I'd refer to Councillor Dillon criticised the consultation. You know, we spend a lot of time just focusing on the overall money. What he, I think, has got to realise is we got to know about some 5 to 6 million that we had to get a week before Christmas. You add the Christmas holiday and New Year, you add that in, and we only managed to get a 3-week consultation. When we had a lot of time for the phase 1 savings proposals, we had a full 6-week consultation. I got to say, I don't think the 3-week consultation was by any means perfect, but under the circumstances, I think the executive, the administration, the officers, we did an excellent job, and we have got feedback, good feedback, and I think we fully understand the feelings of the general public on the issues. Not perfect, but pretty good under the circumstances. One of the trends that is apparent in the country is a devolution of responsibility down closer to the actual users of services. And I was really encouraged, my colleague, Councillor Simpson has already referred to, but I was really encouraged on a personal level that both Basildon, which is in my ward, and my neighbouring ward, Pangbourne, the two parish councils, and possibly also Purley, they're still considering a decision, have agreed to help subsidise the new revised 143 bus service. This extra subsidy enabled us to provide, and enabled the officers to provide several additional journeys to in actual fact make that bus schedule, the new 143 schedule, much more realistic. The positive side of a lot of this financial situation has been it's enabled the community and the members jointly to focus on a number of issues that we don't normally get to focus on and talk about and engage with. For example, analysing the 143 from Upper Basildon, it only really has 10, maximum 12 what I refer to and what the officers, transport officers refer to, is regular but infrequent users. Now, given that the subsidy, the current subsidy, there's £44,000 per annum, you're looking at a subsidy of £4,500 to £5,000 per year per passenger. Now, that, in this day and age, in fact, I would say in any day and age, is just not sustainable. So that figure has been recognised now by the 350 signatures I got from the Women's Institute in Upper Basildon. I felt like Tony Blair at the time, if you remember. They recognise that. And they also recognise another fact. I've said if only a third of the signatures to those petitions would actually use the bus once a month, we wouldn't need any subsidy. So we've actively, the parish council and myself, we've actively gone out, hopefully with the Women's Institute, to try and encourage people to use the bus a little bit more. And if that happens, out of adversity has come a prize. So hopefully, I'm grateful to the efforts of the MPs and particularly the leader, who's not here tonight, for the efforts to secure some transitional funding. And we will use that transitional funding as an administration to work with parishes, to work with communities for the benefit of all our residents. So I'm totally in support of the report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Bowick, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the savings proposals and our use of the transition fund, which really affects some of our most vulnerable people in the community. Children's centres, we received the fourth highest response after theatres, libraries and public transport. 384 people responded to consultation on children's centres. Between them, theatres and libraries accounted for 82% of all the responses. 384 people responded on service area, as I said, which affects the most vulnerable people in our community. And members here this evening and members of the public will know how important are the services that are delivered by children's centres. Important to people who don't have the voices that are as loud as some others. And we are determined here to hear the voices of those people. And I'm working hard with our officers to ensure that the vital services that are presently delivered through children's centres continue to be provided, continue to be delivered, but in a way that West Berkshire Council can afford. So this evening I urge members to support the proposal that we use £50,000 of the transition funding to establish a wider network of community access points, much in the way in which children's services are delivered in the Hungerford area to the west of the district, where the central point, the local point there in Hungerford, delivers effective outreach services to places such as Lambourne and Kintbury. We'll be using that transition money, if it's approved, to work together with faith groups, voluntary organisations and health professionals to provide a good range of resources to sustain the services that we'll be delivering through the access points. We're going to need to provide those people with some training, and the transition grant will be used for that. Responses to our consultation showed real concern at the loss of buildings, and I want to assure members and the users of children's centres that the services will continue to be delivered. Some of these users are among the most vulnerable, as I've said, in our communities, and protecting their interests in this council is this council's highest priority, and I urge members to support the proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. Councillor Franks, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The financial situation has been well versed, but this council has to set a balanced budget, and part of that, through the Phase 1 savings and the proposed Phase 2 savings, have caused a lot of soul searching. But the reality is, local government is changing. we need to concentrate on our statutory duties and protecting the vulnerable in society who we serve through adult and children's social care. I'd like to thank all those that took part in the public consultation, but also note that the more vulnerable in society are often unable to drum up hundreds and thousands of signatures, and I'm pleased to see that this has been reflected in the balance of the transition funding in front of us this evening. I'd like to talk about some areas within my portfolio. The Council increased the funding for the Citizens Advice Bureau as the economic downturn was starting, to help them cope with the anticipated increase in people needing advice and help. It was unfortunate that saving had to be identified in this area this year. But we're pleased to announce the proposed 25,000 of transition funding for CAB will mean the proposed savings have been reduced by over half. The suggested reduction in funding for the DART, which is only small part of the DA offer overall, it was part of wider savings proposals within the Family Resource Service. And this transition funding before us has been put forward specifically for the DA service. In addition, I'm pleased to announce funding has been secured from the Home Office to continue the IDFA service of outreach and community domestic abuse support. It's a very important part of the overall DA service within West Berkshire. Also, I'm responsible for waste services, and in front of you the proposed savings of the contribution towards the RE3 partnership for the Smallmead Household Waste and Recycling Centre. Myself and officers are having ongoing discussions with RE3 partnership, and our aim is to retain access for our residents to that Smallmead site within Reading. I would urge all residents in that area to make sure you know what recyclables are picked up at the curbside and use that service, and also be aware of our recycling site at Padworth, which is very well laid out and should be better used. With these ongoing discussions and the total amount of savings required, we are proposing that that saving is agreed this evening. I support and welcome the transition funding and the proposals and the recommendations in Appendix C.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Councillor Bale. Microphone, please.
It's the head that's the problem. I would like to thank members of the Executive and the relevant officers for the time that they have spent reviewing the considerable number of responses to the Phase 2 consultation. I know it has been an extremely difficult task to find constructive ways of maintaining these important services with the very limited transition funding. So I'm particularly pleased with the proposals that affect Pangbourne. Councillor Law has already referred to the 143 bus, and that service from Pangbourne to Reading is a lifeline for many elderly and vulnerable passengers, vulnerable residents. And the petitions which were presented to an earlier meeting of the Executive from the residents of Pangbourne, Purley and Basildon has demonstrated the local support for that bus service. So I'm also very pleased that certainly Pangbourne and Basildon parish councils have committed some funding to support that funding already offered by West Berkshire Council, and I hope that Purley may also make some funding available too. It's the potential closure of Pangbourne Library which caused much concern, and residents registered their support for the library, not just by responding to the consultation, but also establishing an embryonic, if you like, Friends of Pangbourne Library group, with a number of local residents supporting the library in that way. And the transition funding, which Councillor Cole has referred to, will enable the officers to pursue the self-service option and will give the Friends group time to understand the way in which they can support this new service by recruiting volunteer helpers, extending the use of the library building by other groups, and investigating the setting up of an appropriate legal entity to enable fundraising and other support for the library service in Pangbourne. And this group has been in contact with libraries in other areas which are either partially supported by their local council or completely independent. Children's Centre in Pangbourne is part of the Downlands Children's Centre, and it's scheduled for closure. That centre is based at Pangbourne Primary School. So this transition funding hopefully will give some time for the school and the Children's Centre to review some possible options in line with some of the points made by residents, the users of that Children's Centre, when we met with them some little while ago. I understand the financial issue, but that service is very much valued by it might be a small number of parents, but those parents who use the Children's Centre actually do need it. It is impossible to meet the imposed financial savings without significantly affecting services for residents. The neighbourhood wardens is also another service which is much respected and valued in Pangbourne. And again, I hope there'll be a way of keeping that going as well. So again, all you get is requests, but in this instance, I can see that by working together, we're making progress, and the service reduction hopefully will be not as significant as was originally proposed. So again, my thanks to all of you for the work you've put in to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bale. Councillor Metcalfe, please.
I hope we don't get too much feedback. Hearing me once is boring enough without having to repeat Paul's. I said it because I knew you were going to say it first, if I didn't say it. Now, this transitioning money will help mitigate some of the shortfalls. But can I make just a general point? In West Berkshire, we're very fortunate and proud of the hard work and dedication of our volunteers. Many give freely of their time at a cost to themselves, and they support many aspects of life within our community. So the onus must be on this council to support them in every way. Chairman, only this week I was approached by a lady who was working towards, I know, it doesn't often happen, I can assure you, who was working towards maintaining the school lollipop lady. The money through their PTA was not a problem, but the level of bureaucracy was the killer. A ream of paper full of rules and regulations was received, I am getting feedback, was received from this council. It was enough for them almost to give up the idea. Now, don't get me wrong, this particular job is a highly responsible job, and there must be a level of expertise thrown into that job. But please, please, let us not put too many obstacles in the ways of our volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Metcalfe. Councillor Linden, please.
I'm very pleased that one of the mobile libraries is going to be kept in use, because certainly that's going to be benefiting my local residents, some of whom do use the service quite considerably, and obviously, hopefully they'll still be there at Sainsbury's in Calcutta. I expect they will. So I'm very pleased that we could actually retain one mobile library, and that will certainly help with accessibility. I'm also hopeful that something may come out of the warden service as well, and I hope some of the parishes, many of whom are raising up to the issue, it may encourage others more to do so, and hopefully, possibly, might encourage a few more people to stand in 2019, because some parishes are short of people standing for the parishes, and I know it's councillors and parish councillors don't grow on trees, so that is also important. I think, all the gooseberry bush, but I do think it is also important that the government also considers, certainly to quite a lot of authorities, that when there is going to be money handed back on the business rates, that they make sure that it is also fairly redistributed, and that maybe not all of it needs to go flying up to the north, and there still needs to be some money coming down to southern authorities. And I would think that is important. It may not be a huge amount, but it also is important to provide the services which our residents really need and want. So I think we do need to be fair on that in terms of how these resources are reallocated. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Linden. Councillor Locke, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak, but I am now. I was delighted to hear Councillor Simpson, who I can hear muttering away, about the 154, because Beech Hill, as you know, I often say, Mortimer, we are the outpost of the area. We're right on the edge. We're not in the centric of Thatcham and Newbury. And if they have this bus, if they may have this bus, which will cost, the cost is shared at the moment between West Berkshire, Wokingham and Basingstoke and Dean. It costs approximately £1,745 each, which isn't a lot. But for Beech Hill, which hasn't a school, it hasn't a doctor's, it hasn't really anything apart from it's a very community centre. It has a shop in the church, and that will be one way that they can get to the park and ride and then pick up a bus to Reading so that they can go to the hospital and so on. So I was very pleased, and I do hope that goes ahead. The only other one they had was the 75, which went from Beech Hill to Mortimer and through Beedon and everywhere else. And the thing I'm very passionate about, and I was very pleased to hear Councillor Boak talk about it, children's centres are not just nice to have. They are quite essential. I heard something quite interesting at the Health and Wellbeing today. A baby, when it's born, its brain is 25% developed. By the time it's 3 years old, it's 80%. That shows you how vital, absolutely vital, these early years are. And the centres do help with the expertise of the people who go into them to teach parents how to play, how to work with their children. They can often prevent depression and so on going on, and they help them to develop their fine gross motor skills, their social needs, their social skills, and perhaps all sorts of ways. And I think one thing that the Burfield Centre, which I'm very keen on, they do outreach work, just the same as Hungerford. They go out to even further outreach, such as Burfield, Padworth, and of course Mortimer. And they work as well, which is very interesting, I think, with the traveller families. We have I won't call it a development, it's a site, Four Houses Corner, many of you know it, and they have got the parents there to come in gradually to the centre, and so they now feel more comfortable for the children going to school. And I think this is one of the things which children's centres can do. So I do hope that they have the support so that experts, they can see when a child isn't developing properly. They can put in early intervention and they can save. If you think of a triangle, they can go in at the bottom and not reach crisis. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Locke. Councillor Edwards, please.
Chairman, Wash Common Library is in my ward, and I've been closely associated with this library since 2004. The current deputy leader was instrumental with me in opening not just the container library, but we had a new facility built, and it is well used considering the size of the building. It's not just a library, it's a community centre. There are lots of groups who go in there. They have a young person's reading session and things like that. And I'm very sad to hear that it's going to be on the closing list. And I do hope that we can find money from somewhere to keep it going. £37,000 it costs to run this library, which is a large amount of money in comparison with some. And I'll be having words with the town council and local communities to see whether or not we can keep it open, not perhaps on the same scale, but at least keep it going, which I think is an essential part of the community. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Now, before I come back to Councillor Frederickson, is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Councillor Bridgman, please.
Very briefly, Chairman, I simply want to associate myself with the remarks of my fellow ward member, Councillor Locke. The saving for the Beach Hill is an isolated community. As Councillor Locke says, it doesn't have an awful lot of community facilities, but that it has a vociferous parish council and a good, striving community. And to keep that community in touch with the rest of West Berkshire, and indeed with Reading, because after all, Reading is a natural point for that end of the West Berkshire area, is vital. And I'm very pleased to hear the comments from Councillor Simpson about moves to continue that bus service. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Frederickson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. To start, I'd like to briefly discuss the proposal in front of us tonight concerning neighbourhood wardens, and then I'll go on to address some of the points Councillor Dillon has raised. When we're looking at neighbourhood wardens, we have to consider that the vast majority of the council's budget is spent on services that are legally obliged and recently have an increasingly high demand upon them. In that sense, we had to consider including services in the consultation, such as the neighbourhood wardens. However, that consultation has brought parishes such as Newbury, Thatcham and Speen and community groups together to discuss what further contributions they can make to maintaining this service. Furthermore, the consultation response has clearly conveyed the value that our communities place on the work the wardens do to keep our communities safe, clean and welcoming, and therefore we are making £50,000 available to them. In response to some of the points raised tonight, it's worth taking a step back and thinking about the process that we have gone through. Unlike many authorities who are in a very similar position, we decided to run public consultations. Not only one consultation, but two. Even where there were very, very limited timeframes, we made the decision that we wanted to engage with our communities and understand their views and feelings, and understand, most importantly, how they prioritise the services that we were looking at. Councillor Dillon makes reference to particular comments regarding guidance from legal services and other such similar services. Particular reference is made to a comment that says if due process was not followed, the proposal would be illegal. That is true of every single proposal, not just in a local authority, but in business, as is everywhere else. If due process is not followed, then what comes afterwards is often deemed illegal. This is standard business practice, and we were talking to the Department for Communities and Local Government as we considered all these potential proposals. The next bit to bear in mind is that we fought for transitional funding. Many other authorities are not seeing any transitional funding. They are lumped with what they had. Furthermore, when we got that transitional funding, we made the commitment that we would put all of that into frontline services. Not a penny of that is going into reserves. Furthermore, we are fighting tooth and nail to get more access to the £80 million worth of business rates that we generate. So what does that actually mean, that entire process? That is over 40 different organisations based in West Berkshire. That is involved over 300 meetings. That is in reference to those where the executive have attended alone and only in the last 3 months. Officers have supported the entire process. Councillor Dillon makes reference to this being an ideological motive. It is not. The motive is reality. The motive is reality, and we must make savings. However, we've worked with MPs and we've pushed back against central government and accessed the funding that we are discussing and allocating tonight. We must also remember that when we are looking at these particular proposals, we need to make that funding available as quickly as possible when we're looking at the next financial year to enable our communities to work with that funding and make it count. That's why we ended up with 3 weeks rather than 6, but that's why we're so hasty in doing an executive and a full council tonight, because we want to make that funding available as quickly as possible. There was a particular comment that Councillor Dillon made, and it should be commended in a sense that he says we're willing to work together to find ways to reduce the impact. Now, when the cameras are away, when we're not in this chamber, councillors on all sides, the party allegiances in a sense fade away. Every one of us cares about our communities and wants to do the best for them. And now, if we look at the position that we were in, and when Councillor Dillon makes reference to that particular commitment, Councillor Dillon was elected almost a year ago. Yet in my portfolio for HR, legal, communications, financial assurance and other services, when we're talking about potential income streams and things such as that, those discussions are here tonight for the first time. It's been a year and those discussions have not come forward, but I'm glad that they're here tonight. When we take a step back and think about the decisions that are being put in front of us tonight, this isn't a budget of ideology. Let's be frank and honest. It is a budget of lesser evils. What we are actually having to consider is questions along the lines of, do you want to ring-fence child protection? If yes, then should you be subsidising theatres to the level that you are? Do you want to have more social workers? Do you want to invest more in adult social care? I would imagine the answer is yes. Then should you be maintaining the levels of staff that you have in your licensing process? These are the questions that have had to be considered as we go through this budget process, the 300 meetings with 40 different organisations and the care and commitment and dedication of over 1,000 officers. Let's be frank. If the Conservatives were sat there and the Liberal Democrats were sat here, would they be considering a very similar budget to what we're looking at tonight, if they work with officers? The reality is, probably. And I do not stand here and say particular councillors are lazy of one particular party. That is not the case. The reality is, there has been no alternative budget from the Liberal Democrats. That is not a political point in that sense. The reality is, they would be looking at the same proposals that we are looking at. It is a budget of lesser evils. And when we are answering those very difficult questions that I have just described, immense care has gone through balancing very, very difficult decisions that none of us, Liberal Democrat, Green, apolitical, Labour or Conservative, would want to make. But we're in the position where we had to make those decisions of the budget of lesser evils. Not because there aren't other alternatives, but because the alternatives are far less palatable. And it is for that reason that I second this motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Frederickson. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've had a very full debate tonight. One of the things I've discovered have been brought home to me in very stark terms is how different things matter to different people. Some people, libraries are the most important service. Others, it's buses. People, I think we all recognise the need to spend money on domestic violence and how to prevent it. But we've had to look at budgets like disabled children's breaks, how we handle that, how we look at children's centres. And these are the sorts of wisdom of Solomon issues that we've been grappling with over a number of weeks. And I've spoken to people who will say, libraries don't matter because they don't matter to them. But of course, they matter to many other people, people in our communities. Other people, it's the buses don't matter, and so it goes on. And we've come forward and we are making some very, very difficult decisions. We have a budget to spend. We don't have a budget plus a pound. We have a budget, and we have no magic wand to spend any more than that. At a national level, mention has been made of the government and government policy, but I, as a citizen of this country, do not want to see the mistakes of my generation handed on to my children to clear up the mess. That has to be grappled with, just as this authority has to live within its means. Been a bit of talk about rural isolation, and I think there is some very good things happening here. We've been doing a lot of work on village agents. When we talk about the children's centres matter, but what matters is the services from the children's centres. They matter more than the buildings, and we've got to make sure that it's those services that are protected. Mention was made of the substance misuse service. I don't know what you do or don't know about the substance misuse service, Councillor Dill, but please, I will happily go and take you to visit They are partners that we work with. We have a very, very good substance misuse service, and they are doing many great things in our communities. What we need are proposals, not sound bites. We've had an amendment talked to which was never actually submitted. We don't actually know where the money was to come from. What we've put forward in our paper is some very clear decisions. Across many councils, a very similar debate will have been going on. Many councils, particularly in the South East, have had very severe reductions in revenue support grant. Sure, hindsight is 20/20 vision, and if we had known we were going to face the scale of cuts that we did, we would have prepared things in a very different way. That came as a shock, not just to us, but to pretty well every authority in the country, and particularly the South East. Can I thank colleagues for their creative thinking, particularly in relation to the libraries, where there is a lot of very, very good work going on to try and protect that service and transform it into a new service. And I think councillors have very rightly recognised the work that's been happening in transport, which Councillor Simpson has been leading, to protect that bus service. And again, a lot of very creative and novel thinking going on about how we can protect those services. When we started out on this, when we realised what a deep financial hole we were in just before Christmas, I did not expect to be able to save the lion's, should be seeing the lion's share of the services in Lambourne protected, and I commend you for the work you've done there. But overall, I think we do need to thank our community for the way they've engaged and the way we want to continue to engage. We've consulted, we've listened, and we've acted, but there's still a lot more work to do. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I will now put this motion to the meeting, the recommendations as laid out on page 5 of your agenda. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Against? 3 abstentions. Thank you very much. Yes, noted. Thank you, Councillor Drummond. Right, so that is passed, and as such, that is the only item on the agenda for this evening. So I will now close the meeting. I thank everybody for coming, thank the public for coming, for their participation in this, and I now close the meeting. Thank you.